What are we all looking for right now? We're looking for cracks of light in the incredible chaos and a political alternative that shatters the mold of the political culture in this moment, where the Carney government is all in on AI, all in on mega projects, which are going to be fountains of corporate welfare that fundamentally will create profits rather than social good. We need to capture a significant portion of the wealth and profit being made in this country and funnel it directly into addressing the crisis of everyday life.
After winning a decisive victory in the federal NDP leadership race in March 2026, Avi Lewis is now the head of a party that's been experiencing some hard times. The NDP hit rock bottom in the last federal election and were reduced to just 7 seats in the House of Commons, losing official party status, the worst result in its history. As the new leader, Avi Lewis's challenge is to reorient and revive the NDP by organizing new and old supporters, and lapsed ones too. Can Avi Lewis make the federal New Democratic Party relevant again? Can he put the party of labor, social democracy, and social justice on the path to power? I'm Adrian Harewood, and this is In Bed with the Elephant. A former CBC, Al Jazeera, and City TV journalist, filmmaker, and activist, Avi Lewis comes from a gilded pedigree. He's NDP royalty. His grandfather, David Lewis, was leader of the federal New Democratic Party in the early 1970s. His father, Stephen Lewis, led the Ontario NDP for nearly 8 years, was Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, and was one of the country's most renowned orators and respected statesmen. His mother, Michelle Landsberg, was an influential journalist and pioneering feminist social activist, and his wife, Naomi Klein, is an internationally acclaimed journalist, public intellectual, and best-selling author. Avi Lewis's leadership of the federal NDP signals an unapologetic shift to the left for a social democratic party that veered to the political center in the last decade, particularly during the tenure of former leader Tom Mulcair. Under the leadership of Lewis's predecessor, Jagmeet Singh, the NDP propped up a minority Liberal government in exchange for the passing of progressive legislation, including a landmark national dental care plan and an anti-scab law in federally regulated industries. Yet despite these legislative successes, the NDP saw its seat count collapse in the April 2025 federal election. The beleaguered party has been floundering ever since. Joining me now to talk about his plan to revitalize, reorganize, and rebuild the federal NDP and transform Canadian politics is NDP leader Avi Lewis. Avi Lewis, welcome to In Bed with the Elephant.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got the great title, don't you?
It's great to see you. It's been a long time.
What, 20-odd years?
Yeah, so we have a bit of a connection.
Yes.
Right? So our connection is with the show Counterspin.
Which you hosted after I left.
Well, you were the famous first host of that show. I was like the proverbial pinch hitter.
Right.
I was a stand-in for Carol Off.
Yep, on the taxi squad.
Indeed. But it's great to see you. It's been a long time.
It's so good to see you too.
And you haven't aged at all.
You neither. Are we done the fluffing? This is like Sammy Maudlin on SCTV. No, you, babe. No, you look fantastic.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. No, but thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Real pleasure. Really You've been the leader of the federal NDP since the end of March. You won a landslide first ballot victory, 56% of the vote at the leadership convention in Winnipeg. I'm wondering what the last 2.5 months have been like for you, Avi Lewis?
A true whirlwind. The drinking from a fire hose is the metaphor of choice these days. I know it's very au courant as a metaphor, but it's been a huge amount of change. Like, in a way, continuation of the campaign. It was a 7-month campaign. All the candidates were crisscrossing the country and simultaneously doing all the things. Developing policy positions, communicating them with audiences, connecting with members, connecting with the broader movements, in particular on our campaign, an emphasis on social movements, also trade unions, from locals and members to national leadership. So a tremendous amount of like building connective tissue of a project in the human sphere in all the different ways, and a ton of media work. So in a way, all of that has accelerated, except that now we're the party instead of a campaign. And that comes, I think, with an extra sense of responsibility. It's, different pressures and consequences of trying to revive a left-wing voice in the political sphere in the pre-existing environment. So moving from the campaign to being leader, and really a similar group of people, although there's a small staff, incredibly heroic staff in the Jack Layton building here in Ottawa. We don't have party status as the NDP, so a lot of the resources and the staff of the party have gone away, since the last election. And, recognizing that the NDP as an institution has been through, prior to the leadership race, right, 3 elections in 6 years, the perpetual sense of minority, the contingency and difficulty and precariousness of all of that. Yeah, the folks who have been in there have just been doing an incredible job.
What surprised you so far?
I think I've been a little bit surprised that some of the mainstream media have shown flickers of curiosity about left-wing populism, which I thought we would just hit a wall of the sort of, the way the NDP is usually treated, which is, I think, pretty... Yeah, there's a particular cartoon version of the NDP that's, that exists in the mainstream media imagination. And I think I've been able to talk to some journalists about things like public ownership, which are outside the current, window of what is considered serious by the very serious people here in this serious town of Ottawa. I think almost in a way, Carney's move to the conservative end of the spectrum and the amount of big changes happening in the country with a conservative liberal vote together in the House of Commons has left a lot of the mainstream media class hungry for something different just from the basic adversarial model of journalism. There's supposed to be 2 points of view in every conversation at least. And so I felt a bit more welcomed maybe in the mainstream media space than I expected.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the fact that you're now on the inside. You're not looking out. You're not looking at the NDP. You're actually inside the leadership. You're the power. You're now the establishment.
Wow.
Within the NDP.
Okay, I gotta go. Can I sob in the bathroom for a minute before we continue?
But what are you learning about the party itself? What state is the party in, really?
Well, I mean, the party is not one thing. And so the most exciting part of the NDP is the base. And I continue to travel, and my job as leader without a seat is to continue to travel the country and to build the base. And we're very serious about building the social infrastructure of organizing power at the base of the NDP everywhere in the country, and trying to figure out how to do that in a party very constrained by resources, by material resources. So we knew that the party was in debt. We knew that, the collapse of our vote and our seat count in the last election meant in very material ways that we just didn't get the money back. You need 10% in a riding in order to get an Elections Canada rebate for the money that you spent. The way our election system is financed is pretty weird. So we knew that there were major material constraints, the number of people working in the party and the money that we have to raise and the money that we have to spend creates constraints. So in a way, we need to do it with people power. And we had already run on a campaign. In fact, all of the leadership candidates ran on one version of another of returning power to the base and base building as an approach. The base remains 2.5 months in, growing. There are a lot of people who have signed up for the NDP since the leadership race ended. And that membership focus of signups is always a big feature of leadership races. But we continue to grow at the member level.
And what are they looking for? And what are they looking for from your leadership, do you think?
And what are we all looking for right now? We're looking for cracks of light in the incredible chaos, of possibility and hope, and a political alternative that shatters the mold of the political culture in this moment, where the Carney government is all in on AI. They are all in on mega projects, which are going to be fountains of corporate welfare for big industrial projects that, yes, will create lots of jobs in certain locations for certain amounts of time and maybe GDP growth, but fundamentally will create profits rather than social good. And a hunger for a politics that actually says out loud, we need to capture a significant portion of the wealth and profit being made in this country and funnel it directly into addressing the crisis of everyday life when people are just being extracted from on every level, from their devices to the grocery store checkout. And people are working harder and harder, falling further behind, housing. Nobody's ever dealt with the housing emergency in Canada. We've been talking about it for 15 or more years. The kind of disjuncture, the clash between just the sheer amount of money being made in this country and how hard it is for everyone in their daily lives, the 99%. Everybody is looking for solutions to that. And what we found on the campaign and have found since is that when people get to work in the one-on-one conversations, in the talking to your neighbors, in the power-building exercise of a base-building movement, they feel better. Spend time with people who agree on our basic worldview, doing something rather than doom scrolling. There's a therapeutic, element to politics. And it's been really, really heartening to spend time in those spaces, even as I have to go into the lights and the glare and the firing squad of microphones in the foyer of the House of Commons and all that part of it. Being with our base is incredibly hopeful. And our base is growing and changing, which is cool too.
The federal New Democrats have taken stock of the party's devastating 2025 election loss.
Not only did Jagmeet Singh lose his Burnaby riding to a Liberal candidate with little national name recognition, his party is now in tatters.
Obviously, I know this night is a disappointing night for New Democrats. Tonight, I've been forward a party leader that I'll be stepping down as party leader as soon as an interim leader can be appointed.
Party's review and renewal report came out today, which it says outlines a positive path forward as it rebuilds.
You use words, it seems, these days like rebuild, renewal. You're talking about the need for a kind of a renaissance of this party. The last 15 years for the NDP has been a bit of a roller coaster. The high, of course, was 2011 when Jack Layton wins, 103 seats, 59 seats in Quebec.
My friends, it's an historic night for New Democrats, and you should all take great pride in our achievement. But it's important to remember that tonight's result didn't come about in 35 days. It's been 50 years in the making.
It seems as if the NDP is on its way. 2015, NDP is leaving in the polls. And there's a very real chance that it could form government. And today, when the NDP has been reduced to 5 seats, you lost Laurie Idlot, the Nunavut MP, Alexandre Boulairis as well, recently moved back to provincial politics. Talk a little bit about the party's decline. Like, how do you explain how the party was at the mountaintop in 2011 and it's now kind of, it's in the doldrums a little bit?
It has been a story of periods of sudden and slow decline. And our electoral fortunes have definitely reached the bottom. I feel like the story hasn't really caught up with where we are now because I see immense opportunity in this political moment, in this political landscape. And I am a person who's lucky enough in my job to really get to feel the surging excitement and growth at our base. So I think we've already turned the corner, and it maybe has started flickering in the polls a little bit. It's a bad idea to ride the polling roller coaster because it's not about that. We're actually in this to make material changes in people's lives, and that's the only measure of the success of our project. But the NDP project writ large, it's been steadily down since that high of 2011.
What happened, do you think?
I don't know. I think a lot of things have happened. One thing that happened was Mulcair threw the 2015 election by saying that he was going to balance the budget in the first year, which was nowhere in NDP policy, which was nobody generated that but Tom.
Well, the biggest inequality in our society today is between generations, and adding tens of billions of debt on the backs of future generations is not a progressive value. It's the way of the past, and we're going to change it. It's on the basis of balanced budgets that we will bring in quality, affordable childcare across Canada. But the real reason Justin Trudeau has to talk about tens of billions of dollars of debt on the backs of future generations is because he won't ask Canada's largest corporations to pay their fair share. I will. That's a progressive value.
And when he said it and he doubled down on it, he said that it wasn't just a matter of his political preference, it was in his DNA. And everybody knew that would mean massive austerity and cuts. There's no way to balance a budget the size of Canada's in a single year without that. And by all reports, including the official biographer of Justin Trudeau, Justin went home that night and told Sophie, we just won the election. And they came out, a few days later with a plan to run 30 billion deficits for at least 3 years in order to create jobs. And they passed us on the left. So I think that moment where it looked like we were going to win government for the first time, and Tom Mulcair did something that he just did. Like I'm not like I don't think it's all his fault, but that moment where he shifted to the right, I think accommodating the traditional expectation of NDP leaders that the mainstream media is going to portray us all as drunken sailors who just want to spend, and he's still accommodating to that reality, right? And so he pivots and expresses some form of like fiscal accountability in the mainstream neoliberal sense. And that was a colossal mistake. That's not what we're for. The fact of that and the dramatic turnaround in those polls and the dramatic turnaround in the energy that it looked like we could form government for the first time after the tragic Hollywood moment of losing Jack right after the breakthrough and that whole incredibly dramatic thing, that's almost like a signal point for the story of the NDP moved to the center and we lost our base. I don't think it's as simple as that.
Your friend Judy Rebick, who's been on this show, she was saying that she actually thinks the decline began with Jack Layton. And she suggests that the centralization of power within the party is contributed to its decline, that it lost touch with its roots, that it lost touch with social movements. Is there merit to Judy's argument there?
Well, I mean, whether or not we all align on that story, we are reversing that trajectory. And it's been an emphasis since the very early days of our leadership campaign that trusting members, believing in the membership, loving and respecting the membership and trusting, the base to organizing community. Now it's a necessity. Even if we wanted to have a centralized operation that tried to control everything, we absolutely don't have the resources to do it. But it's not our political culture in any way. And I do think that the base is our strength. It has always been. The NDP is a political party. It is not a social movement. But the NDP as a left political party is the only party that can have free-flowing relationships with social movements and see itself as part of a common front against now what we see as rising authoritarianism. I don't think the party has thought of itself in that way for a very long time.
You have said we must become a mass movement. You said, and you're saying right now, we have to grow our party. We need to build trust again. And to do that, we need to trust the party's grassroots first and let them lead our party from the ground up. How do you go about organizing this party? How do you go about going beyond your grassroots? Because you need to bring in other Canadians as well.
Big time. And that's been the really exciting thing about this first 2.5 months. So at Winnipeg, this is not just me, by the way. This is the will of the members of the party. In Winnipeg, we passed a resolution on the convention floor with a massive majority to create a permanent organizing model in the NDP. So this is, in a way, like an expression of a consensus within the NDP that we actually need to be building at the base. There's a lot of great organizing going on, right? Starting with one-on-one conversations, deeper canvassing, longer, more persuasive conversations, rather than just identifying support and checking boxes in a more technological or technocratic version of organizing. This is about building community and building power from the bottom up. Those things should be more decided locally than a template for an entire country with so many different local and regional realities.
I'm curious about how you go about organizing two particular constituencies. One constituency is that constituency that's been alienated by the NDP. The working class folks who used to vote NDP, but in the last maybe 25, 30 years, have steadily gone towards the right and now support the Conservatives. And also, I'm curious about how you go about organizing the people who don't vote. You know, in the last election, 69% voted. So that's 31% of Canadians are not voting. That's an opportunity, I would imagine, for the NDP. So how do you go about organizing those folks?
I think there's a bunch of different things here. In the working class connection, I spoke to the Acorn Convention here in Ottawa when I first got here a few nights ago. So there's a base building organization. It's more like a social movement than it is like an NGO. It's working class led. I'm talking about our housing policy. A lot of it is taken from social movements on the front lines of the housing emergency. And so the demands that Acorn is making overlap to an extraordinary degree to the demands that the NDP has and that we had in our leadership campaign as well. And so we're already calling for a lot of things that social movements are calling for because we have worked with social movements in developing the platform, at least from the leadership campaign. And the NDP can do that more and has done that historically as well.
I wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to In Bed with the Elephant. If you can, please follow us in the app that you're using. If you already follow us, thank you. And please do take the time to leave a rating or a review. It helps to get more people listening to our show. And please keep spreading the word about us to your networks. In a world drowning in misinformation and disinformation, never has the work of journalists been more important. That's why we here at In Bed with the Elephant are so grateful to our podcast's founding sponsor, Perfect Books, for their support of independent journalism. Perfect Books is an independent bookstore located at 258A Elgin Street in the heart of downtown Ottawa. Perfect Books, a store for book lovers.
There was no teeth to the LEAP manifesto. And it's just kind of been thrown around now as being this given radical document that everybody knows about that has made enemies in Western Canada and all this kind of thing. But ultimately, that's a principal criticism, that there was nothing that was taken. I mean, they created a not-for-profit of like 4 people, and I'm not exactly sure what they did, and then it folded. And so this is a very huge question mark. Is he going to be able to organize differently? And I don't see the evidence of that yet.
Some people have questioned your own organizing bona fides. And I'm thinking about Nora Loretto, who's someone that you're very familiar with. Yeah. She's interviewed you, you're a friend of yours. But she's questioned
I don't know if Nora and I are friends.
Well, friends,
exactly.
Okay. Perhaps comrades? I don't know.
Definitely been in the space for a long time.
But she's questioned your organizing bona fides and whether you've actually kind of been in the fray and you kind of understand what you're doing. Make the case for yourself.
Well, I think anyone who thinks that they're the master organizer is off to a bad start with organizing. I mean, I do see myself as an organizer, and I don't think most politicians do, because I've been working in and around social movements for, a really long time. But I've been trying to support organizing through storytelling, because what I do is, like you, I do journalism with fundamental acts of storytelling, whether it's communications and writing or documentaries or any kind of media interventions in support of organizing. So it's like, what are your core skills as a person and how can you contribute? So I don't need to be like the organizing director. I need to understand the importance of organizing, and whatever my skills are, I need to contribute to a mass organizing effort. That's how I see my role as leader of a party. And it's unquestionable that our campaign attracted a huge number of great organizers, raising, somewhere around $1.5 million.
The most in
7
history.
months, the most in history for an NDP leadership campaign. Not just the money, but the scale of our organization with, dozens of regional chapters across the country, many of which had hundreds of members. And the scale of the victory was simply an organizing project.
You've talked about the necessity for the NDP to create a big tent.
Yeah.
What does that involve? And what kind of compromises does one have to make when, in fact, one is a big tent?
I don't see it as much as like calculating the electoral coalition, although I think we need to do that as we approach the next election, and there's valid reasons to do that. I think about the offer. And this speaks to your earlier question about how do we reach people who are not voting and not engaged in politics. What we've done is we've channeled a lot of movement demands and come up with formulations that address the everyday emergency that people are in of trying to get by.
In a country awash in wealth, there is no excuse for life to be so grindingly hard for the 99%. It is shocking and it is shameful. That's why cost of living solutions will be our focus. Policies that will give people real relief from rising grocery prices, rents, phone and internet bills, and more.
This reaches audiences from people who are living in poverty while they work multiple jobs to people with 6-figure salaries who also feel incredibly precarious economically these days. And when we talk about public ownership and a public option for groceries to deal with the crisis of food prices, public option for cell phones and the internet to deal with the fact that we have the highest cell phone bills in the world and the crappiest customer service on earth, and on with our policy proposals, like a rollout to have kind of like a housing secretariat that would be a public developer that hires public construction companies to develop millions of units of non-market housing, supportive housing, cooperative housing, nonprofit housing, taking things out of the market, naming market failure as the great crisis where people cannot afford a dignified life on the wages that they're paid in this iteration of capitalism that we're in, and proposing public ownership as a solution. This is an offer, a political offer, that actually extends to people we've lost to the conservative. It extends to young people who have never seen political solutions that would actually make their lives better. Free transit, free tuition.
But you have to persuade people because there's been such an assault on the idea of the public over the last 25 years, right? The idea of the commons.
Totally.
That people feel somehow that the public is, well, less than, or it's inferior, or it's unable to deliver the goods.
Look at public housing. Public housing is shitty and broken down because it's been abandoned and under attack since the 1990s when the feds walked away from it. And yet, when we talk about the public should be beautiful, the public is ours, we strike a chord with people who feel community and connection and the power of the collective as the antidote to doom scrolling, the enshittification of everything, the fact that the billionaire, soon-to-be trillionaire tech bros are building rocket ships because they know the planet is burning. They're going to populate them with as many of their own spawn as they can and just leave us behind. Like, people feel that sense of connectedness to community is the revolutionary power, and the public is an expression of it. But we have to be real too, Adrian, about the fact that we have all been neoliberalized, and capitalism has colonized our own imagination and our own lives to the cellular level. And so I don't believe right now that our current government is capable of doing these big things, because I don't have a lived experience of a government that did. I've been to other countries where I see public housing and public spaces and public services that are beautiful and amazing. But I haven't seen that in Canada in my lifetime. We actually need to build together the capacity of the government to do big things for the benefit of the 99% and recover a sense of the public that is beautiful and an expression of our collective dreams and desires as human beings. And that's a project that I'm excited about. But yeah, we're starting from where we are.
You know, I'm thinking about Robin Kelley right now, the African-American historian who teaches at UCLA, that idea of freedom dreams. You're talking about dreaming, the importance of dreaming. And you know, the Globe and Mail says that, you know, public ownership of grocery stores is unrealistic, that it is a dream. That
makes me so excited.
How do you respond to their argument? Their argument is that the margins are so thin, and that you can't make money doing this thing, and that the best thing to do is to have competition, and that will reduce prices.
I mean, like the fact that the just what you said there, that the Globe and Mail dismisses as a dream, I think gives me tremendous hope, because the guardians of an economic right-wing status quo story are so threatened by this idea of a public option for groceries that they devoted their lead editorial to trying to crush that proposal 3 weeks after we launched our campaign and proposed it in Canada for the first time. And since, we've seen cities from Montreal and Toronto and others, you know, looking at the idea. We've seen a huge public debate about it. The arguments against it are really bad faith. Everybody knows that the margins at retail are small. The secret of a public option for groceries of 50 warehouse-style stores across the country with 6 or 7 regional distribution hubs, the secret to that model is that the big 5 grocers that dominate 80% of the market dominate the wholesale purchasing of food from farmers and food producers, right? So they extract the lowest prices from the producers. They charge the highest prices to the consumers, and they control every element of the supply chain in between. So of course it's not just about the 2% or whatever retail markup. It's about the entire supply chain. When we talk about a public option for groceries, we are talking about a national procurement network that feeds into school food program at the federal level or federal institutions, as well as feeding the co-op grocery movement, which has been fallen on hard times in part because it can't compete in the purchasing side, right, with the big 5 grocers who collude and price fix on both ends of the equation. The co-op groceries can't offer the discounts that they used to because they can't compete at scale. We're talking about the federal government using its power, its resources, its scope, and its scale to actually impose competition in the sector by providing a public option at every stage of the supply chain. And in fact, a couple of Zoran Mamdani's advisors on the food policy are a little disappointed in his model of 5 pilot stores, although given the level of delivery that he has exhibited in a matter of months since becoming mayor, I believe he could probably do, I wouldn't be surprised if he could do anything. But they prefer our model because it's national in scale and it achieves those economies of scale that you need to really lower the price of groceries. And our model so far suggests that these 50 stores across the country would cost about $300 million a year and would deliver savings of 30 to 45%. And I think Galen Weston and the grocery barons would, even if a federal government ever got serious about talking about this kind of model, they would remember how to make a reasonable profit, right, without gouging us, because their profit margins and sheer profits keep going up and up and up, even as people are really, really suffering with the cost of food. So the fact that the guardians of the capitalist mainstream logic are threatened by this idea and have devoted a lot of their editorial might to rebutting it is a sign that we're really onto something. And I think it's a sign that we're onto something not just for groceries, but for everything.
David Lewis, 1,046. Jim Lexus, 612.
I'm very happy at the result. It's very decisive. There is no difference of purpose in this party.
All right, we are going to take you live to Edmonton now, where Stephen Lewis getting some applause from delegates at the NDP National Convention. He is about to address them. Let's listen in.
The approach, the analysis, the policy of the NDP differs profoundly from that of the Liberal government. This isn't a matter of some minute repositioning of the NDP to the left of the Liberals. This is a matter of fundamentals. We differ from the Liberals on so many issues. Allow me then to count some of the ways. First, feminism.
Through all her uproarious years, my dear lifelong friend Michelle Landsberg has fought for these noble, honorable, often unfashionable causes, and every person in this room is better for that fact.
When I read of injustices to women or immigrants or any of the people who don't have that plump, self-satisfied, moneyed power in our society, I am so angry on their behalf and I want to fix things.
Your family has contributed a lot to the public sphere in this country, and my condolences to your father, passing Stephen Lewis. Your father was very important to a lot of us, to many people across this country. I can recall missing economics classes in the late 1980s, early 1990s to watch Kieran's Camp and Lewis, to listen to it on Morningside. And your father was such a breath of fresh air and such a beacon of light. Your mother, Michelle Landsberg, for over decades.
Thank you for talking about my mom.
Contributing as a columnist at the Toronto Globe and Mail, at the Toronto Star.
Yeah.
Your grandfather, David Lewis, as well, one of the founders of the CCF, the NDP, and contributed to the CCF as well. Yeah. Your family has a lot of skin in the game in this country and has for a long time. However, you weren't always on that particular path of contributing as a politician. No. And I'm just curious about your own journey to here. How have you gotten here? Because the Avi Lewis that I was familiar with 25 years ago would not have even dreamed, I would think, of being in this position.
I was very scathing about getting into electoral politics for my whole life until the LEAP manifesto at the Edmonton Convention.
In 2015?
2016, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was sort of my entry into the daily life of the party, and I kept it up since then over the last 10 years because I think I just reached a point in my life as an activist journalist, as a storyteller in support of organizing, where I've been part of a lot of movement moments. I came up in the globalization moment of the 90s, and when Counterspin was on the air, that was the big debate of the time, the lock-in of privatization, deregulation, corporate-friendly taxation and rule globally, right? That was the moment that the end of history was declared, and our late-stage capitalism phase began in triumph. And so my life has been defined by the struggle against the global lock-in of these policies. And we've tried a lot of different things, and I've been a part of a lot of different movement moments, from, the Seattle WTO moment to Occupy Wall Street, and very important racial justice uprisings in the last 10, 15 years, Black Lives Matter 1 and 2, in a way, you could think of it that way, and Idle No More, and mostly on the social movement side. And the electoral scene in my lifetime has been going to the right, the entire electoral machine, all parties, right, and the entire electoral political consensus. And I guess I felt at a certain point that we couldn't abandon the electoral, that it needed to be part of the project. I don't see it as the be-all and end-all. I really see the role of the NDP as a left-wing political party as part of a common front alongside social movements, not trying to supplant movements, alongside militant trade unions, not trying to just bring everybody into the big orange tent, but actually seeing the electoral sphere as one that the left has not invested a lot in Canada, while we've been throwing down really hard in social movement activism. I think it's all really important. And I guess I reached a point in my 50s where I was like, I've been behind a microphone for a long time, trying to put whatever access that I had to mainstream media spaces, like you, we try to put it in service of like deeper and more radical political change. But things are getting worse. So I guess I see in the NDP a potential vehicle that can be used to push the conversation, to win material changes, and actually contest for power if we can build it enough. Like, we're not close to it right now, but I believe we can. It's a country of 40 million people where there's a progressive consensus on all kinds of things and a lot of potential to work with. And yet we've been losing. So it's not that I think this is the one and only secret, but it's a place where I felt I could make a contribution. But until 10 years ago, I was super not into politics in any way.
Do Canadians need to change, or does the NDP need to change in order to win power?
I think both are really necessary, because I think that there is no Canadians, right? There's no monolithic identity. But I do think that too many of us are just swept up in the pace of technological change, everything getting worse. The idea, the radical political imagination to dare to let yourself believe that things ought to be better in a society where so much wealth is being extracted and the condition of daily life for the vast majority of people continues to get worse and worse and worse. Like my dad had this refusal to believe that things need to be so shitty. The last line of A Race Against Time, his Massey lectures about the HIV/AIDS pandemic in the early 2000s and his role in that struggle, he says something like, "Can someone please explain to me the contemporary balance of values?" This was like the last thing he wanted to say in his kind of manifesto on fighting this pandemic globally, right? Why can't pharmaceutical companies just make the patents available? Why can't governments force them to do it when millions of people are dying unnecessarily because structural adjustment has already removed the capacity of African countries to have functioning healthcare systems and pay for these life-saving medications?
There has to be another way. There has to be a better way.
Exactly. And that sort of moral refusal, he's a smart guy. He knows why, right? But his thing was just like, I refuse to get it. I refuse to accept it. And I think that spirit is one that Canadians, our society, our culture, we're close to it, but we haven't stepped up, in mass numbers and said, this is not okay, right? We're still divided because the system is so good at dividing us. And we're still in competition because we live in a system built on competition, and finding that solidarity and that collective voice to say, there are better ways of doing this. We know what they are. We get them now. That's the project.
Here in Canada, our government, in fact, most of our political class and most of our mainstream media is, I believe, deeply out of sync with the majority of Canadian people. In a recent poll, almost 2/3 of people said they want the Canadian government to recognize Israel's actions in Gaza as a genocide. And at the same time, our Prime Minister continues to insist that a future Palestinian state must be a Zionist one, a bizarre talking point that demonstrates just how out of touch our ruling class is.
Avi, your family has, I would say, a complicated relationship with Zionism.
Definitely.
Your great-grandfather was an anti-Zionist, but your father and your grandfather were Zionists. Your father kind of changed over time. Your mother too.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this Zionism journey that you and your family have been on?
Yeah, so the Jewish Labor Bund, which is like my great-grandfather in the Pale of Settlement in Eastern Europe, was an anti-Zionist, Jewish socialist trade union, political party, cultural movement, and Molly Crabapple's book on the Bund is absolutely incredible, Here Where We Live as Our Country. So that's the history, that's the tradition that I come from 3 generations ago. My grandfather David Lewis started in that political tradition. And, in the post-war period, post-Holocaust, I think there was, like a lot of North American Jews, our family kind of has never had a fixed position on this. And my grandpa moved sort of back and forth across the line. I think Zionism is an ideology, a political ideology that is really based on a lot of fear of the Holocaust happening again. And that fear has been pretty ruthlessly exploited in the Jewish community to maintain unquestioning support for Israel.
But also a desire for safety.
Of course,
safety
a fundamental
comfort,
desire for
security.
safety that all humans deserve and have. The question is whether it comes at the expense of another people's land and safety and lives, or even a genocide ongoing in Gaza as we see today. And so my own conviction is that, like in my family, where my mom, spent her 18th year on a kibbutz and was a labor Zionist when a lot of Zionism was a socialist movement, right? Because people don't understand that the Zionism had a lot of its roots was as a socialist utopian movement that ignored and invisibilized the founding crime of the state of Israel, the Nakba, the actual displacement of 750,000 Palestinians and massacres and all the rest, was required to establish this state that was supposed to make the desert bloom and have the most moral army in the world, and all the other Zionist myths, that I grew up on, that a lot of North American Jewish people grew up on. I think a lot of North American Jews, a huge number, are somewhere on a journey from inheriting a bunch of myths and propaganda and lies that we were taught as children, that we inherited, and seeing the state of Israel for what it is, a renegade actor on the world stage, wantonly and with impunity violating international law, committing genocide, starting world destabilizing conflicts, now killing thousands and thousands of civilians in Lebanon, a totally illegal invasion of that country. These things are facts which we can see on our phones all day, every day.
And yet your critics will say that your anti-Zionism contributes to Jewish people in Canada feeling unsafe.
Well, I think
and it might be contributing to anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean,
Jesse Brown, for example, makes that argument.
Yeah, I won't deal with some of the extreme voices, and I really consider that to be an extreme voice. But I do believe that the new focus on anti-Zionism, which you see coming from the Zionist super pro-Israel community, is a sign that they're really threatened by it. And it's because a huge number of Jewish people around the world, but especially in North America, the veil is falling from our eyes, and we are actually seeing the behavior of the state of Israel for what it is, and the complicity of groups like CIJA and other pro-Israel lobby groups in creating cover for genocide. And so, yeah, I think a lot of Jewish people are questioning those founding myths and are coming out of the long, wide desert of propaganda and mythology and actually seeing the world for what it is and wanting to be on the right side of history. That's anti-Zionism today in the 21st century. And so it's no surprise that the pro-Israel community is frantically trying to reconstruct anti-Zionism as now the new threat, just like they did. BDS was a long-standing campaign. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions was villainized and criminalized as the big threat. And they keep moving the goalposts as the movement for Palestinian liberation evolves and finds new expressions. So yeah, there's a lot of Jewish people who are still trapped in the myth of a benevolent Israel and are making unbelievably twisted excuses for these horrific acts of violence and imperialism. But there are a lot of Jewish people who are just peeling away the layers of all of these stories that we've been programmed with and coming out on the side of justice. So I'm really proud to be part of that transition. And I think we have to recognize that a lot of Jewish people are somewhere on that journey. And it's a journey like decolonization of us as white folks and settlers that takes a lifetime and is a continual process. I've got time for people who are doing the work, and I consider my political opponents people who refuse and are locked into a story that leads to untold violence.
Avi Lewis, thanks so much for stepping up and joining us.
What a pleasure to talk to you today, Adrian.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to In Bed with the Elephant, a production of Ricochet Media. Let us know what you think about our show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcasts. The producer, editor, and sound engineer of In Bed with the Elephant is Dave Sarazin. The video editor is Dennis Gonzalez. Executive producers Ethan Cox and Andrea Houston. Music by Parker Harewood. Production assistants Desiree Nick Farjam and Sofia de Guzman Rivadero. Graphics by Sarwa Abdul. Interns Gabriel Ryan and Juan Suarez. I'm Adrian Harewood. See you next time. Additional clips provided this week by Archie Mann, host of the podcast The Hatchet.